about my last name is that it's So I'm thrilled. I did not look at the calendar when we scheduled tonight, but I'm thrilled that it's on St. Patrick's Day because there's a couple things that Irish do really, really well. One of them is tell stories about themselves, and we're going to hear some stories about a gentleman. He might claim some Irish heritage. I know he spent probably far too long in Scotland recently, and he'll tell us about that. But they also like to perform, and we're going to have a performance tonight. I can't claim that the second act has any Irish heritage, but
there is.
Oh wow, okay. Then we're in for a treat. But we are here on this unexpectedly cold evening to hear from these two storytellers. And I just want to ask anybody in the audience who hasn't been to a Tipsy Talk before to raise your hand. Okay, all right, wow. So we host these Tipsy Talks in an effort to get people downtown, out of their houses in the middle of the week, in the deep, dark winter, so that we have a better sense of community and a better sense of local economy and support from the locals, right? Because if we all weren't here, Kathleen wouldn't have much to do this evening. And we like to keep our downtown vibrant, and we like to keep our businesses thriving. So thank you all for being here. We're going to start by hearing from a gentleman who is going to tell us a little bit about what his life has been, how it has developed, his reflections upon his life, and lessons for us all to consider as we enter the next year and decade. So, please give a warm welcome to Kevin Vandever.
The first thing Patrick said about learning a lesson for me is don't. So that's it. Yeah, I do have a little Irish heritage, very little. And recently I looked up my 23andMe, hoping there was Scottish, because I just spent 5 weeks in Scotland, and there's a little bit, there's about this much Scottish in me. So I'm good with that too. So yeah, thank you for coming. I see some friendly faces and new faces, and probably some people that walked in hoping to get a pint of beer and celebrate St. Patrick's Day, and instead to have to listen to me beat out loud. So that's good. So what does it take to live a good life? That is what I went to Scotland to try and find out from my writings, from my journals, from my essays I've written. And that answer takes many forms. As a matter of fact, I'd like you to take some time just for a minute and think about that question and how would you answer it? And there's no wrong answer. It's personal. And there's probably some prescribed recipes for what it takes to live a good life, but really it's the mess we make to get there. So that's kind of what I went to do on Sky. And this is the view from my window of the Airbnb I stayed in. So this was one of the good days. I was there 4 weeks on Sky, and it only rained twice, once for 7 days and once for 13 days. So other than that, it was beautiful. So I had over 200,000 words in journals, notes, essays, and I went to try to figure out a collection of essays that I could put together and publish, or at a minimum, present to my granddaughter one day. So that was my goal. And from that, I'd like to read a little bit from what I did. I'll read a couple things throughout the next 30 minutes. The setup for this first reading is as a teenager, my brother shot me in the head with a pellet gun, and I fell from a second-story window. and I tried to squeeze the pellet out like a zit. So with that in mind, and that question in mind, let me read to you from parts from Father That's Worst. I've never shot a gun, other than a BB gun, that is. And I've done plenty of that, but not since I was 12, when my friends and I would play Army in the woods near my house on Liberty Lake, Washington. I have to pause for a first footnote. Actually, that was true when I wrote it. However, my wife and I visited friends in Taos, New Mexico a few years ago. At dinner one night, they invited their neighbor who grew up in the area. We ate, drank, laughed, drank more, and smoked some weed along the way. The talk of guns came up, and I mentioned my BB gun only experience, and the neighbor decided he wanted to change that night. So, one of my friends, the neighbor, and I walked deep into the Taos woods at midnight with a flashlight, a target, and a .22 caliber pistol. Thankfully, and surprisingly, nothing bad happened. We set up the target, put a flashlight on it, and took turns shooting at the target. It was fun. And I could say now that I shot more than a BB gun. I was proud. On the way back through the woods, I stepped off the trail and fell into a hole a few feet deep. After being pulled out by the other two, I felt okay, hopefully nothing broken or pierced, maybe just bruised. The next morning, I realized I'd lost one of my favorite hats while out in the woods. My friend and I decided to go back in the daylight to retrieve the hat. We found it at the bottom of the hole I fell into. We also realized how close I had come to cracking my skull on sharp rocks just above where I had fallen, and discovered that if I had fallen a little sooner, I would have rolled maybe 20 feet down a mountain onto more rocks. I hopped down, grabbed my hat, and I felt sudden relief. That was my favorite hat. Okay, back to the main thread here. There were a few rules in our board games in the woods. No aiming at the face, a maximum of 3 pumps on the gun, and no pellets, only small round BBs. We, at most, followed one of those rules. Once logistics were established, we'd split up teams and we'd go to war. The hardening I would get from war would be useful later when I took a pellet to the head, not during one of the BB gun wars in middle school. That was much later when I was in high school and had moved 3,000 miles from Liberty Lake. My younger brother had pulled a prank on me, a good one. And a good prank like that can't go unpunished. If later that night, I took a ladder from the garage and quietly leaned against the house below my brother's room. His room was on the house's second floor. I climbed the ladder while my friend held it steady at the bottom. My plan was to scratch his window, and when he came to check out the noise, I would scream or pop my head into view to scare him. What I didn't take into consideration that he would be cleaning his pellet gun at the time. So when I scratched on the screen of his window, he loaded the gun and pointed it in my direction, so that when I peeked in for the scare, he instinctively pulled the trigger and caught me approximately a half inch above my left eye. That was my brother's story. The jury is still out approximately 45 years later, whether he knew it was me outside the window all along. I fell back off the ladder onto the grass. My friend laughed at me at first, then realized I was hurt. He sprang into action and helped me into the house, where I announced, "I've been shot." Maybe that was not the best entrance. Chaos ensued at that point. I don't remember if my brother came out of his room first, if my stepfather went in after him, upon hearing the news. I went into the bathroom and attempted to squeeze the pellet out of my head like popping a zit. I was unsuccessful, partially because the pellet was lodged in my skull pretty well, and partially because I had locked the door, so my mother was first in to enter and see the damage. Meanwhile, my stepfather smacked my brother around a little bit before taking his gun and throwing it in the wooded area across the street from my house. Then he took me to emergency room where I had the pellet dislodged and the wound bandaged up. Having a small pellet removed from your skull will change a man. Maybe it's a thirst for more carnage or a deep subconscious lust to harm others. That was now my fate. There was no turning back. The first time I almost killed a man, I was 16 years old, except it wasn't a man, it was a young child. Let's call him Jimmy, who was 6 or 7 at the time, old enough to brag to my friends and me that he could run around my house and never get tired, and too young to know he was incapable of doing so. Challenge accepted. He ran laps around my house where we cheered him on and mocked him when he began to slug. "You're not quitting, are you?" we would say. "Wait until we tell all your friends." And so, skinny little Jimmy ran around my house until he collapsed in a tiny heap on my front lawn. He could not speak and he could barely catch his breath. His chest heaving up and down as controlled by a hydraulic pump. We watched Jimmy lying there, hoping his next breath would come, while I began to ponder where I was going to bury his body. Jimmy lived, and I don't recall seeing him much after that. We moved cross country not long after, and I heard much later that Jimmy wouldn't make his 30th birthday. It'd be another 15 years before I'd almost kill another child. This time, my daughter. My wife and I were on vacation with another couple in Colonial Williamsburg, Virginia. My daughter was a month or so from her 3rd birthday, and my wife was pregnant with our 2nd child. As I had many times before, I carried my daughter on my shoulders as we walked around taking in the sights. She liked to see over the crowd. My friend was doing the same with his daughter. At some point, we stopped to enter a store, and I attempted to dismount my daughter by reaching my arms up, grabbing her on the side of a rib cage, and flipping her head first into a somersault to land squarely on her feet in a perfect dismount. However, my daughter was laughing with her friend, so she was squirmier than usual, and I didn't get a good grip. I dropped her 1/4 of the way through the somersault, about 6 feet above the ground. Unlike a cat's uncanny ability to land on its feet after a fall, Felicia fell face first. Her chin hit the ground before the rest of her body. I immediately scooped her up. She was screaming. I saw blood gushing from her face. So I tucked her face into my chest and rushed her to her mother. Someone nearby who worked at the park witnessed the scene and escorted us to their on-site urgent care. Felicia, barely 3 years old, bravely took stitches to the chin without moving or crying. She was courageous, sure, but how about some points for my creativity and degree of difficulty? Eventually, she would let me carry her in the same manner, in a get back on the horse again spirit. We both agreed to reduce the complexity of the dismount. Years later, I would show Clea that revenge for her headbutt to my broken nose as an infant is best served when it involves her severe peanut allergy. It was a beautiful Sunday afternoon while at a neighbor's house for a barbecue. I was inside talking to my friend when my youngest approached me and asked, "Dad, can I have this?" "Sure, honey," I answered while only glancing at what she had in her hand. A few minutes later, I heard my wife's voice from the backyard. "Who said you could have this drumstick?" Like a good attorney already knowing the answer. "Dad," my daughter answered. A drumstick is an ice cream product made by Nestle, vanilla ice cream in a waffle cone, covered in chocolate and sprinkled with peanut chunks. I've enjoyed them since I was a kid, and they are delicious. And apparently, the peanut chunks sprinkled on top of the drumstick are part of the peanut family, and therefore potentially deadly to my youngest. I remember the incident unfolding like this. My wife snatched the ice cream from my daughter's hand mere moments before she took a bite. My wife remembers it a little differently, that our youngest took a bite and broke out in hives, which is what my wife noticed. Then force-fed our daughter Benadryl and waited to see if she would die, thus killing the buzz of the party. Her story is more believable. The last time I almost killed a child, it wasn't a child, there was more than one. They were adults. My youngest was one of those adults, along with her boyfriend at the time and another roommate. I was visiting and decided to cook dinner for their household. I cooked gumbo, one of my specialties. I have 2. I made a good batch that night, and everyone enjoyed it. After dinner, I was cleaning the stove and accidentally nudged one of the stove's gas knobs, enough to cause a leak, but not enough to hear or smell it at the time. We all went to bed, and one of the roommates woke up earlier that morning to the smell of gas and checked the stove to see if that was the culprit. He saw that the gas was on and immediately shut it off. It had been on for 10 hours, and most of us in the apartment, now awake, had a headache. We opened the windows and doors and let fresh air dilute the gas, and eventually the air returned to a breathable level. No one died, but at least one person admitted to having wild and vivid dreams. It's been over 10 years since I last endangered one of my children, or anyone else for that matter. I seem to have finally lost the taste for carnage, discovered so many years after surviving a pellet gun shot point blank to my skull. I no longer engage in BB gun wars in the woods or challenge 6-year-olds to run around houses until they pass out. That said, I now have a granddaughter who, as of this writing, is 7 years old, has allergies, and only lives a mile away from me. The opportunities are endless. So that's the messy part of what makes a good life. I have, of the 24 essays that I came up with, came together, it's not, they're rough, it's not final yet. There's a few of them like that show the darker side of what makes a good life. The next part of, I wrote about my childhood, I wrote about some of those incidents that you just heard. The next part is, I wrote about the biggest part of my life. Karina, who's right back here, called Mimi by Lilo, and my 2 daughters, Felicia, who's in the audience, and my youngest, Kalia. So this is what I was doing when I was sitting here with a glass of wine in front of this fire when I wasn't looking out that window in the sky. And I started to put together stories of being a father and a husband. And that was the meat of it. Lots of memories. One thing I found when I was doing this is, as I dug into more of my old journals and my old essays, so many more thoughts came up, so many more memories. So this is definitely, started with a pile of material, a lot of it not great material. And now it's a structure, but it's not the end. It's only beginning. I have more essays in mind, and they'll have to fight for room in the collection as it is now. So, yeah, do see. The next part of the essay, there's a few, from the collection, there's a few essays about that little person in that photo who's not here tonight because she has dance lessons, so apparently bigger names there. Nah, I'm not bitter. I'll just have to change some of the essay collection a bit. So I wrote about her, mostly including her in other essays, but there's one essay I kind of wrote about her that I'll read to you in a second. Yeah, let's do that now, actually. No, wait, before I do that. No, never mind. I'm going to read it to you now. This is another essay from the book. It's called Diamond Quest. What are your superpowers? Lilo asked, after placing a folded blanket on my head. Without this, you don't have any powers, she added, and then continued. Mine are blowing bubbles. And what's the thing where you can change colors to match what's around you? Camouflage, I answered. Yes, blowing bubbles, camouflage, and I can shoot fire. She looked at me, waiting. I have super strength that I stole from the bad guy in the last game. Lilo told me I could do that after defeating a guard in our last game, which was our first, sort of an experimental game. We called it our beta game, where Lilo made everything up as we went along and directed me on how to play. The second game was for real, so I decided to keep the super strength and left the folded blanket on my head. I can turn invisible and shoot lightning bolts, I followed. Cool, those are good superpowers, Popsy. I placed the Donald Duck, Pluto, and naked Barbie toys at strategic places around her bedroom as instructed. Yaya is the boss. We have to defeat him. Mickey and Minnie are his guards. Put them on the bed, Lilo instructed. I did as I was told, and Mickey and Minnie were much larger stuffed animals than the others I had set up. They would make great guards, and Lilo knew this. Yaya is a soft, cuddly stuffed toy elephant, Lilo's favorite toy and her nightly sleeping buddy, the perfect crime boss. I placed Yaya on the bed's pillow in a position that would be best protected by the guards. Each level lasted about 10 minutes. After the beta level, Lilo told me it was only one level of 9, and each level would be more challenging than the last. My uniform had fallen off my head twice during the first battle, so Lilo told me I could wear the blanket as a cape, but I still needed to keep it on to maintain my superpowers. These types of in-game adjustments are why you play a beta level. The other modification was that Lilo's Lilo scrapped the bubble superpower and replaced it with a special biting power from the cape, a unicorn bath towel complete with head covering housing the biting mouth. I still have the bubble power, but I won't use it right now, she added. The game consisted of Lilo asking me which bad guy we should battle first. Once I selected the bad guy, she would set the scene, tell me which power she would use, and then act it out. She would then look at me to indicate it was my turn. I would follow suit, announce which power I would use, and then engage in battle. Lilo would then adjust the scene as she saw fit. That battle weakened me. I need a healing potion from your backpack, she might say, as she approached to obtain a healing potion from the backpack I didn't know I had. The battles otherwise mostly stuck to script. We would defeat 2 guards, one of us would be weakened and need a healing potion, and just as we caught our post-victory breaths, the crime boss would capture me and put me in jail. Lilo would use her camouflage power to rescue me, and then we'd defeat the boss in a tough battle, using all our powers. And both would end up weakened. After the victory, we'd make it back to camp and need more potent healing potion, which is only available back at our hideout. Beta level complete. Lilo set the stage for level 2. And don't worry, I'm not going to read all 9 stages. The bad guys would switch roles, except for Yaya, who would remain the crime boss. We'd go through a similar battle, with Lilo improvising new twist or sudden surprise I wasn't expecting. But thanks to my training, I knew how to react appropriately. The start of level 3 was interrupted by Karina, affectionately known as Mimi. Lunch is ready. Lilo and I shut down our superpowers and took ourselves to the dining room, where Mimi had prepared the perfect recovery meal. Lentil soup and grilled cheese sandwiches, Lilo's with her special non-dairy cheese. Lilo recounted the battle tales to Mimi like a football coach's post-game interview, remembering each detail, explaining what worked and what didn't. "Thank you for playing the game with me, Popsy," she said. "Oh, you're welcome. I remember playing games like that when I was a kid." "If you could play any game from your childhood, what would it be?" Lilo asked. It was a good question, and I didn't have an answer. I explained to her that when I was by myself, I mostly pretended to play baseball. I'd play all 9 positions and the batter as well. I don't know if that's the game I'd play now, but it was the first one that came to mind. Lilo played video games with her father, who was a master at them, both in skill and his knowledge of the backstories. The experience helped with Lilo's game architecture abilities I just witnessed. I'm sure, but she also had the improvisation skills of a Second City comedy group veteran. Or that might be the biased view from her partner in battle, her grandfather. The conversation shifted from which games I played as a kid and would bring back now to who I played them with. Somewhere in the conversation, Lilo brought up that she wished she had a brother or sister to play with. I remember the stories Karina had told me about how, as an only child, she played Barbies with her mom for hours at a time. Given what I had just gone through, that memory was more impactful now. Hours at a time? I just spent 30 to 45 minutes on our game, and I was ready for a nap. That would have to wait, however. We had a game to play, but there was some holes to fill as far as Lilo was concerned. We moved to the living room. Lilo sat on one couch and I on the other, drawing on her experience playing games with her father. She began to spitball ideas while I asked questions to spark more discussion. She thinks better by moving around, so it didn't take her long to move from the couch to her standing position in front of me, pacing back and forth like an executive while she pitched ideas. I mostly listened and occasionally added a detail or two to show I brought some value to the meeting. She quickly sketched out the plot, but we struggled with our characters' names. X and Y were originally used as placeholders since nothing greater came to mind. I said, what if we keep those names? X and Y sound like secret agents. Lilo loved the idea, if only because she wanted me to feel like I contributed to the story. She was pleased and sat back down on the couch. I asked, should we write down the background to our game so we'll remember it? She liked that idea as well. 2 contributions from me in a row. In the end, this is what she came up with. Diamond Quest. A mysterious heart diamond that most don't believe is real. X and Y are searching for the diamond, which they believe is in the hands of an evil scientist who hates love and seeks to destroy it. X has special powers of fire, ice, bite from a second mouth in her cape, hypnotize, and camouflage. Y's powers are lightning bolt shooting, invisibility, and super strength. Together, they form X and Y's lunch because they love food and it sometimes gets in the way of their mission. They believe in love and want to save the diamond for all to share. The diamond's power is that whoever touches it will have their loved ones, dead or alive, with them always. That one gets me. The twist is that X and Y's mother has been hypnotized by the evil scientist not to believe in love, and she's working with the scientists to stop X and Y. Will they succeed? Stay tuned for the rest of the story. I waited her instructions to start level 3. Thank you. So this thing right here is a novel I wrote, or partially wrote, to 82,000 words. It wasn't completed. I wrote it 10 years ago, maybe, 10 years ago, well before Lila was born. So one of the ideas I had when I went to Sky was to pull out that novel and write one of the essays about writing that novel and not publishing it. That's really the only idea I had. As I started reading through the novel and finding pieces of it, I realized that 10 years ago, I wrote about an 8-year-old, I wrote about an 8-year-old character named Muriel who may be or maybe not be God or some form of wisdom. And she guides the protagonist, Adrian, through a road trip. That's the novel. So I was reading this, I'm like, wait a minute, I was writing about an 8-year-old, and now I just wrote Diamond Quest about a 7-year-old, dragging me around playing this game. So that took the book in a different shape. So the last week on Sky, and now I am writing how I can mix this character Muriel with what I currently do in my collection of essays. And I have some things from Muriel that came out, her wisdom, her magic, smelling flowers in a garden and stopping to enjoy life, and comparing that to Lilo. And I've written a little bit, but this is where I'm at right now, so stay tuned for more. So that's where the piece is right now. So what does it take to live a good life? I asked you to think about it earlier, maybe you did. I like this photo. I think Felicia, the term defines in this photo what it takes to live a good life. Not because of her smile or her moment that she's enjoying, but all the moments that led up to it. The messy moments, the great moments, the fun, the laughs, the crying, all those moments that led to that right there. The other reason I like this photo is the patio is in a house that Corey and I used to own in New Orleans. And I'm currently working on an essay where that patio is the center of the story, because there's many memories from there. So that is really what I'm trying to do with the collection of essays, and it's not complete. It's rough. It's still being added to. I'm enjoying working on it. And I got back from Sky yesterday after working on this, so it's still fresh in my head. That's really all I have to say about it. Think about your own question, what makes a good life, and try to answer those questions in your own way. But we all have different answers. So that's all I have. Thank you very much. Cheers. Forgot to mention that cheers early. I was going to ask you to cheers with me, not for my support, of course, and to help the bar, but also this is called Tipsy Talk, but I think Tipsy listening is also very good, so it could help me out there. If anyone has any questions, I don't know, Patrick, how we're doing on time?
You're doing great. I got a question.
What do you got? What's your question?
I'm picturing you in this quaint little cottage on an island in the North Sea, and all these ideas are flooding you.
Yeah.
Assuming you don't have writer's block.
No.
What do you do? How do you stay on track?
Oh, that's a good question. I did the one way to stay on track is never get on a track. I didn't have a specific goal when I went there. I knew I had this pile of words, and I knew kind of the question I wanted this to answer, not necessarily specifically answer. None of the essays answer the question, what does it take to live a good life? It's all meant to be the central guiding question to a collection of essays. But to stay on track, I made sure I was at the writing desk by whatever, 10 a.m., and I'd work a little bit, take a break, work a little bit more. I made sure I was 4 p.m. in that window, that first slide, so I could watch whatever was happening, rain, snow, whatever. I got all of it. And then the evenings, I gave myself freedom to do whatever. Sometimes I wrote, sometimes I did some technical work. I still had a client around doing some work. So I tried not to put too much pressure on me. I did work every single day I was there except my birthday. I took that day off to go on a hike, and it was actually a really beautiful day to do that. So that, I don't know if that answers, but yeah, because I didn't have a goal of finishing this or coming up with this, I just let myself end where it ended, knowing I was going to come back from Scotland and still work on it.
So did you like jump around between essays?
Yeah, I did. I'd say of the 24 essays I came up with, 10 or 12 are brand new, like Diamond Quest, written on Sky. The other 2/3 or whatever are notes from journals or other essays I'd written that I tweaked and worked. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Did you find it helpful to be there?
I did find it helpful to be there because I could focus on only that if I wanted to. You heard I did other things. I went on hikes, but I love the idea of going somewhere that's tranquil and with no other major responsibilities that I could, and put that mild pressure on myself that I was there to like. Could I have done it in my office at home? Could I have done it a million beautiful places in Vermont? Probably. But I went to a place that my wife and I love, Scotland, and knew I'd be filled with that joy while I was there. Yes?
Do you believe that the essence of living has to do with relationships and following your passions?
Yeah, I'd say both. The question was, do I believe the essence of living is relationships and following one's passions? And I think in my case, both of those are true. I wouldn't, and that's why I mentioned that, I wouldn't put that on anyone else if that wasn't theirs. But as you can tell, the close relationships I have in my life are extremely important to me. And my passion is right. This putting this together is part of what makes what makes a life that worth living, or whatever. What the question was, sorry. And I say that because I worked so long with writing in my background. I had a 40-year career in IT and raised kids and did all that. And then I always said I'm going to write when I retire. And so I'm doing that now. So yes, I think passion and relationships are very important.
Also, joining Gun Sense is a good idea.
What's that?
Joining Gun Sense in Vermont.
Gun sense, yeah. Probably.
I was a very active member.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? All right, well. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, I can't see your hand. Oh.
What's your favorite snack to cook when you're on random islands in Scotland and you're writing?
Sadly, it's nothing I cooked. It was peanut butter and like celery or something. Or something like it, yeah. But I did cook a beautiful batch of local mussels with wine and garlic. I did some cooking while I was there.
You did blood sausage. You did the blood sausage.
Oh, the blood sausage is good. But yeah, a lot of times if I was really into it, I would just grab the jar of peanut butter, cut the celery, and it was good. Anyone else? Yeah? Good? Thank you very much.
We're gonna take a few minutes to get set up for the next act. I can't let this St. Patty's Day theme die. I'm gonna use Kevin as an example. He's kind of like a charming James Joyce, right? You know, that great Irish literary giant. James Joyce, for those of you who don't know, he wrote a short essay called A Modest Proposal. And it's a very tongue-in-cheek story about how we should be eating the children. I'm not kidding. Because they're high in nutrition, they're a burden on the economy and on their parents. And, you know, I couldn't help but channel that story when I heard about the pellet gun to the head, which you must have a thick head. Well done. You know, and then, you know, the portrait of the artist as a young man, he's not, no offense, you're no longer a young man, but he's reflecting deeply. And that is great. I think we all could afford to reflect deeply. So thank you, Kevin, for joining us. Thanks for having me. So, welcome to our second act. I'm really excited because we've done a lot of things here at Tipsy Talks. We've eaten cheese, we've drank cider, we've learned about how to endanger children. But what we haven't done is something that our next act is focusing on, which is visual storytelling. Now, I don't know what to expect because this is the first time for me as well. But I'm really excited to invite Emily Schubert up here to tell us what it is to be a visual storyteller and answer the age-old question, what the hell is a cranky? So, please welcome Emily.
Hello, everybody. Okay, this is the first time in a long time that I've made a PowerPoint, so I'm pretty excited. A little about me. My name is Emily Schubert. I am a Vermont transplant. I moved here in July of 2024 from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I am originally from what I refer to as the borderlands of Ohio and Kentucky, also known as Cincinnati, Ohio. I lived in Pittsburgh for a little bit, but spent most of my adult life in Baltimore, Maryland. And I followed my partner in crime, in puppets and life and apples up here for his dream job, where he is a cider maker. And even though we've been here for like going on almost 2 years, it feels kind of like 6 months to me because I'm one of those extroverts that then like the pandemic happened and then I became an introvert. So now I guess I'm an ambivert. And it's been slow for me to get out and about. But Ian, my sweetie, has his dream job. And so we moved up here and my attempt has now been to try my dream job, which is to be a full-time artist, storyteller, puppeteer. And folks, if you think that that's a lucrative thing to be in this day and age, let me tell you, the hustle is real. But I am here to tell you about how, on my artistic journey, I somehow found my way, partially through the people that I knew and partially through sheer dumb luck, into this, what I am calling, thank you, New American Folk Revival. That is the art form known as the cranky. And here we go. Oh, man. Wait, where do I point?
Is it off? Left side of your trigger finger. You gotta flip the toggle.
Oh.
You should get Kevin up here.
It's on. No, we got it. Yeah. This is the only slide that has this much text, everybody. But we were asked the question, what is a cranky? So I am here to answer it. It is a scroll-based storytelling device. With ancient roots, it uses a crank to move a scroll along. Usually it's made out of paper, or in this case, it's made out of a thing called Tyvek, which is what they use to like wrap houses with, but it's unbranded. And there are words or illustrations, and it's often accompanied by music of some kind. And Together, image, voice, and melody weave together a form of visual storytelling that has basically been around since the beginning of time. It popped up in cultures around the world at the same time. Why? Because humans are story-based creatures. Why are we here tonight, everybody? We just listened to a bunch of stories. I'm telling a story. We're here because we need stories. They're part of what makes us tick. The Asheville Cranky Fest has this wonderful quote on their website: "The handmade meets the heartfelt, and the simple act of cranking becomes a spell, winding time, memory, and imagination together." And you heard it here first, everybody. I say that Crankies are indeed the gateway drug to the rest of the world of puppetry, okay? This is where it all starts. It's a slippery slope. You will all be puppeteers in a mere 3 weeks from now once you start making these right here. Okay, I have few platforms. This is my one moment where I get to talk about this, and to me, this is important, okay? Cranky is spelled with an I-E. Cranky with a Y is a mood. It means ill-tempered or irritable, or working badly or shaky. You can be cranky in that way too. One is a mood, one is an art form. Though you can be a cranky person and make crankies. I have indeed done it many times. Okay. Crankies have this incredibly long history. Indeed, as long as human beings have been making paper and forms of paper on bark, this kind of storytelling has been happening. We're talking as far back as 475 BC, everybody. That's 2,500 years ago. And those are only the ones that have survived, okay? And so I have some pictures of some different kinds of cranky-like objects and storytelling objects from around the world. This is from India. These started appearing, as far as we know, around the 2nd century BC. They're called patatrita. And they were basically used as a way to teach people religious principles. And it was a way, these predate books, it predates television, it predates everything. Basically, as soon as we figured out how to put paint on anything that resembled paper, we were making these things. In these, the storyteller basically sits along the side and points to the images, and they're usually vertical. And they're anywhere from 30 to 60 feet long and usually around 3 feet wide. In China, there's this really ancient scroll called the Admonitions Scroll from the 5th, they think the 5th to 8th century, which is 250 AD. And I think that this is kind of funny because basically it's an entire scroll dedicated to the fact that a princess misbehaved at court. And so an artist basically was commissioned to make a whole scroll on how she should be more demure, essentially. And so it's an entire scroll basically next time, play it cool and do this when you're in court, princess. This is the better way to be. Yes, and you can actually still see this scroll in existence in the British Museum in London. The Chinese were also known for making these really beautiful landscape scrolls. So you would see these, and basically it would be full part of your court ceremony, where then you would be we traveled to these far lands, and someone would make the scroll of what it looked like, and they would scroll through it for the nobles, and they'd be oh yes, lovely. In Japan, in the 12th century, there is this really, really famous scroll that illustrates the tale of Genji. You can also go see this one still, and they have a whole tradition of their own. Oh man, I'm kind of emakimono, which is picture scrolls. This is that tradition, and you can watch the entirety of this story on YouTube. Everybody, you can go home and watch it on YouTube tonight. Indonesia is also a place where this was happening. They have this long-standing tradition called Wayang Beber, where they would paint these scrolls. And in this tradition, this is one of the few traditions where the storyteller would sort of roll out and up the scroll at the same time, and point to it with a stick, like you can see here. And then you would get these really interesting libraries of scrolls. So maybe one story would be 17 scrolls long. So then there would be an assistant that would then run and go get the other scroll and have it ready so that when you finish the one, you could get to the second one and finish the story. This all kept moving, and people would travel to these countries and pick up on this art form, and then eventually they would bring it back to where they came from, and then we get this new, basically the moment where the object came into being, where these picture scrolls eventually became part of a contraption, and that was in the mid-19th century. You get the moving or scrolling panorama, which basically changed the way that people thought about theater. It's the precursor to cinema. Basically, people were like, okay, we have this scroll on the ground, but you know what would be really cool? If we just put it in this little frame, and we had some little cranky things, and then all of a sudden, it becomes this more kinetic, interactive thing. And then it started kind of blowing up and changing in scale, and so people would travel to Europe, and they would go and they would see these beautiful things, and they would be able to buy a tiny little pocket cranky, like a postcard of where they went on their travels. And these are still made today. They can be as big as a matchbox, and I have different tactile objects that I'm gonna pass around now because that's who I am, so I want you all to see. Yes, tiny, tiny cranky objects. And then basically as the precursor of cinema, movie theaters and different theaters would start to include these as stories of their own. And so this is a poster for The Whaling Voyage Around the World, which is I think it's the world's current biggest cranky in existence. And you can still go see it at the New Bedford Whaling Museum in Massachusetts. And this is just how big it is. It takes that many people to install it and move it around. This is a picture of it down a hallway, and then this picture gives you a better idea because it has to go up and then curve around and come all the way down the hall, and then I think it curves actually up and goes back down one more time. And I have never actually seen this cranky in person, but from what I know, they crank it once a year due to conservation purposes. And then you get these sort of in-between crankies that are, they were called parlor panoramas. This is the era of scrolling panoramic art, and the parlor panoramas were basically the photo albums of your travels where you would invite all of your friends over to sit in your parlor and have fancy cocktails, and you would scroll through your photo album from your trip. This is actually a drawing that ended up in a newspaper of a panorama about the Trans-Siberian Railroad that was over 800 feet long, which, whoa, that's a long cranky, everybody. It was divided into 4 spools, and it was performed at the 1900 Paris Exposition. And you can also see it today at the Heritage Museum in Russia. Okay. It went from scrolling panoramic art to cranky. Why? Here's the story. This is where Vermont comes into play, everybody. So, the story that I know is that Peter Schumann himself of the Bread and Puppet Theater basically was tired of saying scrolling panoramic art because it's a lot to say. And he was like, well, you crank it, so let's call it a cranky. And then it just stuck. And that's the story I know. I can't find another story out there. Maybe someone has heard it differently, but that is sort of Vermont's stake in the Cranky Hall of History. I do think so. This is a photo of a wee young me as a 19-year-old babe at Bread and Puppet as an apprentice in college. And one of the grand ironies of my life is I now have a house in Barton, which is right next to the city or town that Bread and Puppet is in. As someone that has built a life around storytelling and puppetry outside of Vermont, let me tell you, it's been an interesting time moving to the town next to Glover. And every time people are like, oh, you moved to Vermont to be a Bread and Puppeteer? And I'm like, no. I kind of just followed my husband, and I happened to be another puppeteer. I don't know why Vermont has this weird puppet magnet thing going on. I truly don't understand. Another tradition that has greatly influenced this like revival of Crankies in this country is the tradition of cantastoria, or sun stories. They have a history basically as deep as Crankies go. And they are, instead of like a scroll, they're sort of like a giant flip book where you have images and you have a storyteller pointing to images and singing a story along to kind of like move you through the different images in the narrative. In 16th century Italy, prayers would be sung in the presence of these illuminated scrolls. And then someone would stand on the singing bench and then point to pictures with a stick, and it was sort of like a call and response situation. And then in Spain, in the 19th century, there was this tradition of romances de ciego, in which blind men, actually with a young helper, would kind of like go through towns and just sing sensational news. They were like the true crime junkies of the medieval times way back when, and they would create these images and pictures and sort of tell the story by pointing to them as they would travel town to town. And these things eventually led to be the minstrel shows that we think about during the Middle Ages and Renaissance, and they were always somewhat political in nature because they were touching on things that were, you know, murderous, scandalous. It was about death. It was about the affairs. It was about the politicians of the time. And now we move to this sort of like contemporary moment, right? And so this is where my story intersects with the rest of the grand Cranky world. And make no mistake, Crankies were being made the whole time by theater groups around the world. But little old me, eventually I went to art school in Baltimore, moved away for a little bit, and then as I moved back to town, I had met these two singers that were in a folk duo called Anna and Elizabeth. And I knew that they had started this event in Baltimore City called the Cranky Festival. And basically it was a way for them to showcase this form. They were using Cranky as a way to illustrate old Appalachian murder ballads. And they had basically started this event that was showcasing different Crankies from different artists because there were a couple of people making them at the time. And by a couple of people, I mean like 4, okay, that like were known. One of those people was Catherine Fahey. Catherine Fahey is in the black and white photo on the right, and she is sort of my mentor in the world of Cranky. She lives in Baltimore, Maryland. She was also very interested in this sort of like Appalachian old-time roots connection to how this art form could be used. And the two of them have actually sort of like led people to think about this association with Cranky and Appalachian roots music that I don't actually know is super historically founded. It's sort of like part of this new revival because those songs are story songs and they lend themselves really, really well to this art form. And so basically, as I moved back to Baltimore, Anna and Elizabeth were leaving town and they sort of handed me this torch of, we started this event, it's been going for 3 years, and they had kind of a Simon and Garfunkel moment, and they were like, we gotta get out, but like, we think you can keep going. And I was like, okay, great. And so I took over, and that was 9 years ago. And so for 9 years, I have curated the Baltimore Cranky Festival, and Catherine Fahey is one of my good friends and mentors, who she performed the first Cranky I ever saw, which is actually, this is a scene from the first Cranky I ever saw, which was about, it was called Elizabeth Whitmore, a Settler's Wife. And it was this like really sort of somber song about this wife of a settler who moves to the West and is kind of just like alone while he's off doing his thing, and like the life of a lonely woman out there. And so she makes paper cut Crankies on Tyvek, and she sort of like introduced me to this world of materials that I hadn't been thinking about before. And then this is another Vermont connection. This is Claire Dolan, who runs the Museum of Everyday Life, which is right down the road. And so she is a proponent of contemporary cantastoria and has this amazing piece where she has a costume cantastoria that she like opens up and performs that actually tells you the history of cantastoria on it, which is pretty cool. There are festivals that are like popping up and happening. So Detroit has a festival of cantastoria every year. These are a couple of posters from that. This is like my foray into the world of cranky. I started pretty small. I started making matchbox-sized crankies. I did this series of wildflower fields in your pocket, the shortest stories ever told, and worm parades. And then this is the like actual first cranky I ever made as a mock-up, and I made this like the first year I was out of college when I was sad and not making much art, but I wrote a poem, and so this is my first cranky, and I'll pass it around for those of you who like tactiles. Oh yeah, I also have a piece of Tyvek so you can like feel it. Tyvek is great because it is it's great and not great. Not great because plastic. Great because archival, and also when you shine light through it, it gets this really amazing rice paper quality that is like hard to find otherwise. Here's a still of a cranky this is like a little bit of foreshadowing. So this was the first cranky I ever made in 2015. I like woke up, I had this crazy dream. I woke up and I was like, I'm not afraid of power tools anymore. I'm gonna build this box. And I built this box, and then basically like the images came out of me, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna be a storyteller. And that was, oh my gosh, 11 years ago. This is just an image. I tend to also make paper cut crankies. I swear that one day I'm gonna make a quilted cranky. But for now, I tend to I'm like kind of crazy. I love the monotony of the paper cutting. And then these are just like samples of me layering tissue papers to see what works with the Tyvek. These are stills from a cranky that I made called the Muddle, where like the actual box becomes a machine, and that like through the actual art of the scrolling, you like churn through the story to get to a result, right? This is also exciting. This is the very first moment that Ian ever became a puppeteer. This is my husband. Yes, proximity breeds puppeteers. This is a cranky where I was thinking outside of the literal box, and I was like, what if instead of a box, it's like a dance? And we have bodies as the scrolls, and we like move our bodies, and it's this whole crazy thing. And it was somewhat successful, somewhat of a failure. I learned a lot, and it was called Circles from Lines. This is my contemporary take on cantastoria. I also think it's important to keep all the obscure storytelling art forms alive, and so I have a show called Resist the Gloom on a little cart that I take around, sort of proselytizing my philosophy of realistic optimism.
Atta girl.
Yeah. This is another cranky called Rogue Woman. So basically, like every year I would have to do a festival, and then part of that commitment was I had to make a cranky, and so I would just like start making a cranky. At this point, I have 9 crankies. And then all of a sudden, like every year they expand, or like I learn something different, or I'm interested in something different. So like this year, I was like, I'm really interested in the idea of putting a tree on top of this box. So like, how do I do that? And I also have like a background in costume making, and I wanted to make a costume again. And so the actual scroll kind of suffered because I wanted to make a tree in costume more. And while I was making all of that work, this world has also been growing. I have been organizing this festival. Part of what's so cool about that is that I get to like find artists in other cities that I think are amazing and be like, hi, I have this one tiny platform in this city. Do you want to come to my event and make something really cool? And then they say yes. And every time they say yes, I'm floored. And this is how many cranky festivals there are, and there's only more coming. At this point in time, there are all of these cranky festivals. I just got a grant like 3 days ago to start a cranky festival in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is where I'm from, which is very exciting. I know that Asheville Cranky Festival is on here. That one is new as of this year. Morgantown Cranky Festival is new as of this year. Midbest is new as of last year. Greenfield is new as of last year. Like, this is like a movement that is happening because people lead the stories. And it's really incredible to see, and I feel very humbled and honored to somehow be part of it. This is just like another interesting and cool experience that I got where I had the opportunity this past summer to actually unroll all my Crankies and put them on a wall, which was wild to me because I only ever see them in 2-foot sections. Like, I'm only ever working on them in my tiny little studio and I see the scene, but I don't get to see them all the way unfurled. And what was really cool was that after I unfurled them all, I realized that they were all almost the same length, intuitively. Like, I somehow figured out, like, over time that 10 minutes of Cranky is 15 scenes times 22 inches times whatever. And so, like, in the end, they're all around 40 feet. And I don't know how that happened. But it's pretty cool. And, like, you just get to see the coolest things because it's the gateway drug to puppetry, everybody. Like, it happens in a box, but you can think outside of it. And so there's all kinds of these artists doing amazing things. And so this is a friend of mine that has a Cranky and a TV. This is another friend of mine, Liz Downing. She's on this side that does these like amazing vertical Crankies, and she is mostly just a musician, but she's not a visual artist. And then there's this like amazing Cranky festival that happens in the middle of nowhere, Confluence, PA, every year. And they have a tradition where they get their elementary school students to make a Cranky, and then they get their high school students to make a Cranky. And they get them all up on stage, and they sing and they perform every year. And this year, those high school students made a Cranky that in this political climate in that little town, it was so moving, it made me cry, and they got a standing ovation. And like, that is what is so incredible about this little small revival of a movement, is that like, in the end, I'm in it for the joy. Like, I'm a puppeteer storyteller in this day and age because I am on the front lines of joy, and it's a really important place to be. And it is rough out there. And we need it now more than ever. And so that is my little vote for Crankies. And then before I get off the stage, I'm going to show you the magic of what one is. But before that happens, I need you to know that this one happens mostly in this little box. So I'm gonna ask those of you that have sight lines that aren't great, if you want to, for this moment, to squish in and get to know your neighbor, because we're gonna turn off the lights and we're gonna make this happen right here. I guess I should say, so yeah, this piece is based on a dream that I had early in 2015. It came to me in a series of images. This is all cut paper, just to remind you, and this piece is called Heart Splinters. The heart of the world was once so full, it took up the entire Earth's core. And the world basked in love. It had the sun to guide it in all of its radiant brilliance. And the moon as its muse. Sometimes the world would stay up all night marveling in the blue shadows the moon would cast across its surface. The world had all that it was and all that it held. And there was music and dancing It must have come from somewhere far away, or from somewhere deep within. But joy did abound, and every day was a celebration. But a heart that is too full that there is not much room to expand and grow is a fragile one. And so one day, it burst. And the music stopped. And the dancing ceased. Nobody expected the heart of the world to break. Least of all the world. And as the pieces of the heart traveled, all things fell into a timeless sleep. And the heart shards scattered throughout the land. The biggest pieces fell into the ocean. And that is why sometimes, when near the sea, you might find something pulling at you, something calling to you deep inside. It is the pieces of the heart. Other pieces landed on mountaintops, and that is why sometimes we feel the need to climb them. Others landed deep in valleys and canyons. Others landed in the most unexpected of nooks and crannies. Some pieces were so tiny and so thin they were like splinters. And these splinters, being so small and traveling so fast, found their way into the eyes of people. There, in fact, might be a splinter in all of us. And in all of us, it finds its way to that soft spot in a being's heart and sparks a small fire. It could be this that fuels us, our passions and our search for meaning, passed down from the heart of the world as we grow. It could be this that helps us to see the other pieces when we find them. Sometimes, you can see the splinter fire in people glow. In the wee hours of the morning when the air is just right, or the kind act of a stranger, or a glance between lovers, or sometimes it might stay bottled up until a person's final fantastic moments. But those times when we witness a beautiful sunset, or we turn over a rock to reveal a beautifully wriggly worm, or we stare out at the ocean because it comforts our soul, or we look deep into our own eyes and ask ourselves who we really are, we are seeing the pieces and the shards and the splinters of the heart of the world at work. And with each new discovery, some of that warmth and energy is sent back to the earth's core where a new heart is growing. And it reminds me of that time as a young girl when my mother gave me a small piece of a beautiful seashell. And she told me that one day I would have all the pieces that I needed to be whole. Maybe one day, the heart of the world will once again be whole. And it will not be so fragile. And it will be different, but the same. And it will beat to a new kind of rhythm. And it will love anew. Whoa. Crankies, everybody! I don't know what time it is, so I don't know if we have time for questions.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay. I get. Okay. Yeah?
Is there a reason that like all the old Nintendo games did the same?
I mean, like, I think that there is something inherently also like, we read left to right. Like, this is the way that humans have figured out how to do this. Like, there's some kind of lizard brain thing about it that's there. I mean, I don't know what the direct connection is, but beyond, like, this did predate it, so I'm sure there's a connection. Yeah.
Fantastic. I mean, really.
Yes.
How long did it take you to make this cranky?
This cranky itself, I can answer that because it was January of 2015 when I was, as they say, fun employed. I was back at my parents' house, and it took me the month of January, probably working like 6 hours a day, Colin. Yeah. And this is one of the ones that's like also around 40 feet long, however many seams, yada yada. Yeah. Yes. My Diamond Quest. I heard that story and I was like, yes.
I was just gonna ask you, like, mechanically, you were
Yes. Here.
one side.
Oh, this is good. This is like a fun moment for me, is that you get to see, because I can see nothing. Yeah, I see this like very tiny little like line drawing of a circle from the back, which is pretty crazy. But otherwise, it's all adhered to the front. Oh, I guess I should go this way. So like you'll see like this is what I can see when there's hands, and I know that like this is where the worm is. Yeah, but it's pretty simple, and like I will say that this is technically my second cranky box. I have another cranky box that is the same dimensions, but it doesn't come apart. This one's fancy and screws apart, so I can put it in a suitcase and travel it. I've taught a lot of workshops, cranky making workshops. I have a mailing list that I made right before this that I would love you all to sign up for, because like another thing that's part of my existence is I have run these experimental puppet happenings wherever I have lived. And they are there. For those of you who don't know, there is a Puppet Slam network across the country, and this sort of like cabaret variety show puppet nights. And I feel like, yeah, we got to get them started. Yeah. Yeah.
The Fahey woman that you mentioned.
Yes.
You mentioned. Is she John Fahey's daughter?
She is not. I don't think she is related to John Fahey. Like, but like in spirit she is. I do think that in spirit she is. But I don't think that there's any blood relation. No.
Oh, yes.
Anything else?
How'd you do your music?
Oh, how'd I do my music? So the music, I will say, is like a blend of two artists that I was listening to at the time that I'm going to have to... Kate Dunson and somebody else. They're like pianists that and like, but I have also done this piece. Like what's the most exciting thing for me is to get to work with live musicians when they're around. Ian, my husband and partner in crime, also makes music for me a lot, but not always live. A lot of pre-recorded stuff. But sometimes I'll get to go to fun places and host a workshop that I call Learn How to Be a Foley Artist for a Puppet Show in a Day. And they give me like one musician, and I'm like, you get to make the background track to this crazy thing. And it's really fun. So that's happened a couple of times. And there's also been pretty magical moments of like, you're, like at a festival and they have a generator hooked up and you have to run an extension cord, and then like you get up and you're like ready to put your sound on and your show on, and the generator goes out. And then out of nowhere, everyone brings their phone light up and puts their phone behind your cranky box, and then you have light and you're like, okay, we got that. And then like musicians come up, they're like on the edges, and they come up from the audience and they're like, all right, what do we need? And Ian is back there being like, all right, I'm just gonna give you the vibe and you're gonna make it work. And so then he's back there. I think we were doing the muddle and he was like, okay, ready? Oregon Trail. We're in the West. Okay, planet Earth. Okay, we're in space now. Like but it made it happen. Like it worked, and it was really wonderful. Yeah.
When I first met you, you'd just been given a grant and ticket to the Cayman Islands for a week.
Yes.
So how far have you gone with this? Because
I am
Cincinnati funding, wonderful.
Cincinnati. Yes. So one thing I did not mention is I have this the person that I ended up when the torch got passed to me for Baltimore Cranky Festival, I ended up getting to work with this really wonderful human being that has since gone on to start his own nonprofit called the Center for Cultural Vibrancy. And it's this amazing organization that basically does traditional arts connections from around the world. And he'll bring people from like wherever. And he finds the coolest people. Like he figured out for one of our Cranky festivals how to get these Inuit throat singers to come. And they actually collaborated with Catherine Fahey on a version of the folk story Sedna that is like beautiful. For a different Cranky festival, he pulled some strings and figured out how to get this amazing dancer from Addis Ababa, whose name is Malaku Ballet, who like runs this cultural center and has like invented a dance form where he's known as the walking earthquake. He actually like very much broke my projector bulb light like last minute with his like stomp at the Cranky festival one year, and I had to like get a very hot bulb out with my bare hand. It was very fun, but yes, so basically, like, I got, there's a couple of moments in your art life where you're like, oh, I peaked. I'm never gonna, like, do anything cooler than that. And I got asked by my friend who's part of this organization if I would like, he, like, called me up, like, the week before Christmas, and he was like, would you like to go to the Cayman Islands, all expenses paid, to teach a traditional storyteller down there how to make a cranky? And I was like, yes. Like, what do I have to do? Like, what do I have to do? And so, yeah, I got sent to the Cayman Islands for like 6 days, and I got to work with this amazing woman whose name was Nasaria, who is starting a Cranky Festival like as we speak. Like, she's actively sending me pictures, and they're doing it down there now. And it was this like really, really wonderful exchange. She got to come to the States and be part of a Cranky Festival with us in New York as sort of the whole exchange of it all. And we're hoping to have her in Baltimore in years to come, all visa stuff willing, but yeah, so, yeah, I mean, it's cool, like, it's really incredible to see this, like, and like, Crankies, this is like a larger debate, but I include Crankies under the larger umbrella of puppetry. Not everybody does. Depends on who you talk to. The amount of times lately that I'm like, guys, the puppets in politics and the politics of puppets right now is really killing me. Like, I can't do it. Like, it's in everything, in every world. And so I think Crankies are part of the greater umbrella of puppetry. I would also include clown and burlesque sort of under that umbrella too. Not everybody would, but whatever. I don't even know where I was going. Oh yes, anywho. Any other questions? I don't have to keep talking. Yes?
Are you familiar with Tom and Mary Azarian?
Maybe?
Tom was, probably when your parents were thinking about your arrival, Tom was doing cranky shows.
Yes. I mean, I feel like I've heard those names before. Did they live in Vermont?
Plainfield.
Yes. Did they always live in Vermont?
Not always, but
Did they used to live in Baltimore?
I don't think so. But they've been here since almost when the earth cooled, so they've been around a while.
I mean, I believe it. As I'm saying, like, there's cranky makers constantly coming out of the woodwork, and I'm just, like, trying to build platforms where we can, like, uplift us all.
Tom was doing it about 45 years ago.
Great. Well.
And Mary is still a renowned block printing artist, and still active.
I'm going to give you one of these, because mark my words, everybody, the whole point of this is that, like, in a year and a half, 2 years' time, we have the Newport Cranky Festival. Exactly. Like, truly, that's the whole point. Also, hella accessible, okay? You got a matchbox, you got a shoebox, you got a cereal box, you got some sticks. You can make a cranky. That's it. That's all you need. You got some extra weird packaging paper from an Amazon box that's like that brown stuff that already comes in like a perfect strip. Like, you can make a cranky. Like, that's what is so cool about it and like, that's also what makes it so interesting as an art form is you get visual artists coming at it, you get theater makers coming at it, you get like puppet weirdos coming at it, you get just like a family that wants to have a group project. Like I got to hope, I've been trying to also start these events called open cranks that are like anyone who wants to get up just has however many minutes to get up and perform whatever they bring. And like you just see it. And this family of 5 collaborated on this amazing cranky, and it was all about the phrase almost there, and how the phrase almost there changes from when you're 5 years old and someone tells you you're almost there to when you're 13 years old and someone tells you you're almost there, to the point that you're like, you know, maybe 55 and you think that you maybe should have been there, but like maybe you missed it. And like it was incredible. And it was like read by this like 13-year-old human being, and I was like weeping, and I was like, what? Like, come on, people. Like, front lines of joy. That's what we're here for. Okay, I'm gonna get off this stage. Thank you all so much.
That's it. We got one more event this year before you gotta wait till next year. It's here in 2 weeks. We're gonna hear from Michael Croto, Mimi Magyar, thank you, and Trish Sears. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. Don't forget to tip your bartender and drive home safe. Thanks everybody.
Thank you, Patrick.